Hey everyone, thanks so much for joining the webinar today. Really excited to walk through this content with you over the next hour or so. My name is Brittany Bader. I'm an account executive here at Demand Driven Technologies. I'll be walking through the presentation. And with that, just before we get started, a few housekeeping notes. Everyone is on listen only mode. We do have the chat function available throughout the hour. So if you have any questions, submit those through the chat box. Tanvir Chohan, who is one of our implementation specialists, he will be monitoring the chat as you submit them. And then we'll have a Q&A here at the end to answer any questions that come up. This presentation will be recorded today, so everyone who signed up to attend will be receiving a link to the recording shortly after the webinar. And with that, let's get started. All right. So today, I want to cover the topic of how we're going to enhance planning efficiency and materials flow with Replenishment Plus NetSuite. The agenda for the webinar this morning, just a brief introduction into our company, Demand Driven Technologies, discuss the limitations of the traditional planning solutions that are out there, how we enhance materials flow and planning efficiencies through demand-driven MRP. Have a few success stories of clients, and we'll talk about their results pretty quickly, and then provide a high-level overview of Replenishment Plus NetSuite, which is our native to NetSuite demand-driven MRP planning solution. So to get started, let's start with this concept of autopilot. When we think about flying, whether it's a short flight or across the world, once we're in the air, pilots are mostly running on autopilot to get passengers from point A to point B. And they're really only coming off autopilot to deal with issues or exceptions that are detected, such as taking off or landing, that they have to address. And as passengers, we're trusting the pilot to get us to the end location safely. So when we think about that, why can't we take this same approach with managing supply chains? Why can't we largely manage our supply chain on autopilot, receive those alerts when adjustments need to be made? And using this demand-driven MRP methodology, we can achieve that and take that same type of autopilot approach for planning. So with that, we're demand driven technologies, and our goal is to empower supply chain leaders to achieve tangible and sustainable results using this demand driven approach and run more like a pilot on autopilot. We were founded in 2011, and we're very much the global leader in this demand driven enterprise space. We are fully compliant across the Demand Driven Institute certifications. We were the first to bring a demand driven MRP tool to the market. We have successfully implemented with over 100 clients throughout the world, truly making us the global leader here in the demand driven space with our suite of solutions. We are headquartered in Atlanta, Georgia. We have another office in the Seattle location. And then most recently, we opened up a European office in Bordeaux, France to help us service our clients throughout the world. Talking about some of those clients, here are some of the clients that we serve across the world in several different industries. Do want to note that not all of these clients listed here today are using Replenishment Plus NetSuite. However, they're all still using this demand-driven MRP approach for planning, whether it's a smaller distribution company or a large manufacturing client with locations across the world. All of our clients are still receiving great value through this DDMRP approach. And when we look at our clients and our goal as a company, our goal is to deliver tangible and sustainable results for all of our clients. Our highest priority is to maintain or improve service levels through constant material availability, achieving service levels up to 99% or higher. Many of our clients are also able to compress cumulative lead times as much as 80% while simultaneously reducing overall inventory levels, making a huge impact on the business to free up working capital. Recognize that some companies, their goal isn't to reduce inventory, but our main goal, our main focus is always to maintain those high service levels, maintain that constant material availability. So when we think about how to enhance materials flow and improve our planning processes, let's take a look at how a majority of supply chains are planning today, which is traditional MRP solutions and relying on forecast intelligence. So MRP, it's the primary planning logic used in all major ERP solutions today. And while it was introduced in the early 1970s, the planning logic really hasn't evolved at all, even as supply chains have become much more advanced. And it's based on a sales forecast, and these tend to be inaccurate. The major flaw here is the assumption that forecasts are accurate, and so relying on them, this can result in this bimodal inventory distribution and our materials being misaligned with our real market demand. So that can result in this bimodal inventory distribution, too much of the wrong materials and too little of the right on hand, also known as the bullwhip effect. So, because of this, it also often results in planners, managers mistrusting those signals from the ERP system, not really being able to run on autopilot. So, taking data outside of the system, putting into Excel, which can just be prone to user error, and then also moving away from the expensive ERP systems that companies are still paying for, creating those manual processes. And in the past, about 95% of companies are using some type of spreadsheet to plan and address those limitations in the system. So we consistently hear that from clients that we're talking to, that having those manual processes, really having to use Excel. And so looking at that today, just curious if you're planning in spreadsheets. So I'm going to launch a poll here and just see how many people on this webinar today are having to use spreadsheets to plan. So we'll wait just a few more seconds and then we'll close out this poll. All right. So looking at who's using spreadsheets to plan materials, let's go ahead and share those results. Overwhelmingly, yes, having to use spreadsheets outside of the ERP systems that companies are paying for. So I'm excited to show you how there's a better way to plan today. And in doing that, let's look at DDMRP. Let's overcome those challenges, how we plan planning efficiency with this demand-driven MRP approach. It was really brought to the market in 2011, and it combines key principles of MRP, lean, theory of constraint tactics to align material signals for a smoother flow and really increase visibility across the supply chain. So the way that we do that and the way that it's different from MRP systems where you're utilizing a forecast, you have those planned orders and anticipation of what the demand will be. DDMRP uses actual demand within a relevant range, and that's the way that we're able to enhance that planning equation and impact what we're actually ordering based off of true consumption. Whether that's work orders, sales orders, even transfer orders, we're aligning planning to your true consumption. And that's how we get these near perfect demand signals in terms of what will be sold and when it will be sold. Now, the way that we're able to do that instead of relying on those forecasts is through using these DDMRP buffers. These buffers are applied at the item location level, and where we've applied them, we expect constant material availability of materials. There's 3 zones when we look at these buffers. The first one, that green zone, it's sized to accommodate for a minimum order quantity, an average order size, or an order frequency cadence that we might have set up. The yellow zone, it's our daily usage over one lead time. So this yellow zone is going to fluctuate over time as consumption changes, and it uses what we call an average daily usage. If our demand increases, we'll start to see this yellow zone increase in size. If the demand begins to fall off, we'll see that yellow zone begin to shrink in size over time. And then this red zone, it's more of like a safety zone. It's sized to protect item variation. So whether that's variation or supply and demand, seasonality, Wherever we have more variability, we'll see a thicker red zone. Now, these buffer zones, they recalculate on a daily basis in response to fluctuation in demand, making them very dynamic and responsive to that true market demand instead of relying on a forecast. So the way that we place these orders when we know we need to place a new supply order, we do that based off of what we call this net flow equation and where that net flow lands in relation to those buffer zones. So the net flow is actually pretty simple math. It's just my current on-hand inventory today plus open supply on the way to me, minus any demand due today or in the past, and minus any qualified spikes to give us this net flow. A qualified spike, this is firm demand. It's due within one lead time, but it's a large enough quantity that I want to factor it in early so I can avoid what might have been a potential stock out. So this is the summary of what's flowing in and out of my item, and it works with these buffers to tell me when I need to place new orders. On a daily basis, these zones will fluctuate, and each column here represents a different day of demand. Now I know when to order and how much to order based off of where my net flow falls within this buffer. So my net flow line starts in this green zone, and then as we consume materials, this net flow is going to decrease. When it drops into the yellow zone or the red zone, it's always going to trigger an order back up to the top of green. My on-hand inventory position is going to follow that net flow pattern. So one lead time following the order placed, we'd see the inventory levels increase to indicate we've received more supply. And that's how we keep our inventory levels at true market demand here. As we implement DDMRP, these are some of the various steps involved. This first one, strategic decoupling. Where does it make sense to apply those buffers? Not every item that we manage needs a buffer depending on your environment. Some might still be those buy to order, make to order items where we wouldn't necessarily have to apply a buffer. Some might be managed with a min-max setting. However, wherever we place a buffer, we expect constant material availability. So we decouple anything downstream that's going to dampen that variability from anything happening upstream, help compress our lead times and reduce that bullwhip effect. And I'll show you an example of this when we get into Replenishment plus NetSuite. But once those buffers are in place, we determine the appropriate settings for these items. This always takes place at the item location level so that we're able to account for the difference in lead times, variability. Once those are in place, we see these buffers dynamically adjust on a daily basis in response to fluctuations in demand. And using the net flow, the system suggesting how much and when to reorder, it's very easy to execute on recommendations. And as a planner, I have a lot of visibility, a lot of color coding to know where I should focus and spend my time for the day. So we talk about this suite of solutions. We have an entire suite of solutions, but what we're going to focus on is our Replenishment plus NetSuite, our completely native to NetSuite materials planning tool. We also have a sales and operations planning module, which we won't get into today, but I know that we have several folks on here who have been with NetSuite for quite a while. So want to send out another poll and see if you're already using NetSuite's demand planning functionality. So I'm going to go ahead and launch that poll, give everybody a few seconds to answer that. All right. Thank you everybody for voting. I'm going to go ahead and share those results. So we do have a few people using the demand planning functionality. That's great. I think you'll be able to see some differences in how the NetSuite functionality compares to this Replenishment plus NetSuite functionality for demand-driven planning. And then for everybody who's not using it, just excited to show you this demand-driven MRP approach, again, built completely native within NetSuite. So because we are native to NetSuite, there's no outside integration, no toggling back and forth between two systems. As a user, log into NetSuite like I would any other day, and Replenishment Plus is going to be another tab at the top. Very similar to thinking about adding an app to your phone. Replenishment plus NetSuite, it's installed via the Cloud platform, and we're the only native to NetSuite DDMRP solution in the market. Now, before getting into the tool, just want to highlight a few client achievements. Again, our goal is always high service levels, that constant material availability. And for a lot of clients, that can also come with the decreases in inventory levels to free up some working capital and some compressed lead times. I've implemented this across several different industries, but we have tons of case studies available. If we didn't show your industry, please reach out. Happy to send over more information and really put those tangible results to several of the different clients that we work with. So with that, I'm going to get into Replenishment Plus NetSuite. Really excited to walk through this tool with you today. One second. All right. Okay, so we are completely native to NetSuite. And what you can see here is I've logged into NetSuite like I would any other day as a planner, but Replenishment Plus is just another tab at the top. So it's very easy for an implementation. We're not having to build a separate integration between two systems. Because we are completely native to NetSuite, we're able to utilize this global search functionality. So what I want to do is take a look at a part and show you what's going on in the system, how we can see that net flow and know that we need to reorder if we're taking a deep look at an item. So completely native to NetSuite, we can utilize this global search functionality. This first item, this inventory item record, this would be your NetSuite item record. If I look down here, I see that I have two R plus records. So for every location where I'm managing PPJ, I'm going to have an R plus record. So I can see that I'm managing PPJ at the plant location, and I'm also managing PPJ at the region 1 location. So I'm going to click on PPJ at the plant location. And what I can see right away is this is very visual for a planner. I have a lot of information about this item that's pulled over from your NetSuite record. So I can very easily click into that, go into my NetSuite record. I can see the item description. Frank is the planner managing this PPJ at the plant. I can see the vendor, this replenishment method buffered. I'm managing this item with a buffer, which I can very visually see over here. I can see that right away, that net flow line, it's in the yellow zone. I know I need to place an order here, and I always order back up to the top of green. So I can see my net flow lines falling into the yellow zone, and I'm going to place an order to get back up to the top of my green zone, which is 110 units. So very visual. I can see where my current on-hand inventory is at a point in time today. And then I also have this blue dot, which is my expected average inventory. So I'm not planning to that expected average inventory, but it's just useful. I have visibility so I can know how much I would expect to have on hand at any given day. I see this buffer. If I want to know what's actually going into those buffer zones, I click on this buffer calculation tab. So I can see how my buffer for this item is sized and that net flow equation. So the green zone, it can be an MOQ, it can be a desired order frequency. But for this item, I'm managing PPJ with an MOQ of 20 units. Now, this yellow zone, it's sized using that average daily usage multiplied by the lead time. So that changes based on our change in daily demand. Currently, I'm consuming 6 units a day. I'm multiplying that by a 10-day lead time to get a yellow zone of 60 units. And then my red zone sized to protect that item variation, taking into account my average daily usage, my lead time, but also a variability factor. So my red zone for today is 30 units. That net flow line, I see it's in the yellow zone. I want to see what's going into that. And I can see that spelled out here. I have 45 units currently on hand, which I can see at that purple line in my buffer. I have 130 units of open supply on the way to me. And I also have this qualified demand of demand due today or in the past, and some future order spikes that I have visibility into. So all of that summed together to give me this net flow number of 69. I always want to reorder back up to the top of that green zone, which is 110 units. So my recommended order is 110 minus 69 to give me this recommended order of 41. Talked about that expected average inventory. It's pretty simple how we got that, just the red zone plus half of the green zone. So very visual to see what's going into that buffer and that net flow equation. If I want to see what transactions are affecting my net flow today, I would go over here to this part activity tab. So this is where I can see all of those open transactions in NetSuite that this item's featured on. I've got links to each of those items in here, so I can click on those if I want to see more details about that order. My inventory is always at the top as it stands at a point in time today. So I have 45 units on hand today. And then I look at this, I can see that anything in red is demand due today or in the past. And this is anything that counts as demand in your system. So whether that's, again, work orders, sales orders, transfer orders, we would see all of that listed here. Anything in blue is supply. So these open purchase orders, they're sorted by the receipt date that I expect to receive the supply. So I can see here, this is late, might want to go in and check on this and see what's going on. Anything in gray, further down on this part activity tab, isn't being factored into my net flow yet, only demand due today or in the past, unless it's a qualified spike, which are these items that are bolded down here in red. Now, transaction counts as a spike if it's within one lead time and it's greater than 1/2 of my red zone. So I can see here that my red zone is 30, so my order spike threshold is anything over 15. And I have my lead time window out here, which is how I know I need to account for these in that net flow early. I have this running balance tab, so I can see that as transactions come to fruition, how it's going to affect my inventory position. So I can see here that I'm getting a little low in respect to how much supply I'm carrying on hand and my orders in the system. But that's okay because I have supply on the way before I need to fulfill another order. It's really great visibility for a planner here. And all of this is going into that net flow position into my average daily usage as this buffer responds on a daily basis to fluctuations in demand. So this is how my buffer stands at a point in time today. But these buffers are dynamic, they're changing on a daily basis, which I can see up here in this part analytics view. So right now I'm just looking at the last 30 days, the past month, but I'm going to go ahead and filter on the last 6 months so I can see really how my buffer's working. I can see how the planner's done planning for this job, for PPJ, this part, but I can also see how my buffer settings are. Do I need to make any changes here? We can see if I'm going to take these lines off, and what we can see is that this buffer has pretty drastically changed size over the last 6 months based off of that change in daily consumption. So the buffer's flexing up and down changes pretty drastically in size as we head into the winter and then kind of evens out again. If I add this net flow line back on, I can see how the planner's done managing this part and following that net flow to get back up to the top of green. So whenever the net flow line drops into the yellow zone, Frank managing PPJ did a great job of placing an order to get the net flow line back up to the top of green. And I can see as this buffer is changing size because the demand for this item is dropping off, he's waiting longer for that net flow line to drop into the yellow zone, which gives us the opportunity to work through that inventory position so that we don't maintain a very high inventory position as the demand for this item has changed. So I can see here from October to November that my on-hand inventory position gets a little high with respect to the buffer, but that's fine. That's what the buffer is designed for. We're just going a little longer without placing this inventory, without placing an order so that we can work through that on-hand inventory. So what I can see if I'm looking at my buffer settings is that if my on-hand inventory was consistently at the top of the green zone, top of the yellow zone, that I'm carrying too much inventory and I have the opportunity to thin out my buffer, change some settings to lean out my inventory without risking a stock out. Vice versa, if I'm consistently at the bottom of the red zone with that on-hand inventory level, a spike might cause a stock out. So I might want to change my settings there so I can actually thicken up my buffer for some extra protection to maintain high service levels and that constant material availability. When I look at that expected average inventory, I want to see my on-hand inventory fluctuating over that expected average inventory. A monthly forecast would be behind in adapting to this, but since our buffers are dynamic, it's resizing daily so that we don't end up with an inventory position that we really don't want to see. If I go over here to this network view, this is where we're looking at the item location level. So this is where I can see items that are at another location, and I can see where they are in respect to the buffer. So I can see that at region 1 location, the planner who's managing this item is definitely placing an order because that net flow line is in the red zone. If I ever had a blue zone here, this is where I could see I'm actually carrying too much inventory. I might be able to place a transfer order instead of receiving more supply. So just providing further visibility as a planner here to see how this item is performing at other locations. As a planner, I can see I know I need to place that order. I've gone through, I've checked everything, I've seen the part activity. I'm okay with what the system's telling me. I need to place that order to get back up to the top of green. So I can create that purchase order right from this page by clicking Create Purchase Order. It's going to link up with my NetSuite ordering process. It's going to populate that vendor information, the date, all of that's pre-populated, and then it's just going to go through whatever workflow or approvals process that you have established within NetSuite to make this a firm order. But I probably don't want to go into that much detail on a daily basis. So I'm going to take a step back and talk about how we can really automate more of our planning processes here. And where I would do that is by starting my day at this planner's workbench. So I've already populated that here and I filtered at Frank at the plant. So now we're seeing all of those items that Frank is managing at the plant location, not just PPJ. This is really where I would start my day as a planner, see where I should focus my attention, what items have actions on them that will need to be taken. This is sort of like my personal dashboard. So the color coordination here, it instantly shows me what needs my attention and what doesn't. So all of these are based off of my item's net flow position. That net flow is spelled out again up here on hand, on order, demand. If I have any qualified spikes, where that net flow position is in the recommended order. If I'm looking at this red zone, what I can see is that these are not managed with a buffer. They're actually non-buffered or min-max. And that just means these are my buy to order, make to order parts. This one is managed with a min-max. It's just a more appropriate setting for that item. So we're still going to manage all of those within Replenishment plus NetSuite to do all of that planning and ordering within the same system, and we'll put those settings accordingly where it's appropriate for those items. All of these items in the yellow zone, those are the items that have those buffers applied to them for constant material availability. That net flow line has dropped into the yellow zone, which is why the system has a recommended order. These items in the green zone don't need to spend a lot of time here because that net flow position's in the green. Everything's great. Don't need to do that deep dive. And then these are those items that are in the blue, which means over top of green. I'm carrying too much inventory. So what I could do here is I could say, oh, I haven't, some of these have recommended orders against them. I might be able to call up my vendor, cancel an order instead of receiving more supply so that I can work through that inventory position. Or if I have the option to transfer this to a different location where the net flow line might be in that yellow or red zone, I'm going to place a transfer order instead of receiving more supply. So again, just great visibility for a planner to know where they should spend their time for the day, what needs to have actions executed on them. Where I would take those actions are on the Accept Recommended Orders page. I've filtered again by Frank at the plant, and this is where I'm going to generate my orders and take action off of that information in the planner's workbench. You can see these filters up here at the top. These are just save searches that are pulled over from NetSuite. So if you have a filter that you would want to search on, you can very easily add that for a customizable view. I'm filtered at Frank at the plant. And what I can see when I look at this is that it's only pulled over the items from the workbench where he has a recommended order for the day. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take an action on those orders, and these are sorted based off of priority. So I can click on each of these individually if I'd like, and you can see that they're turning to green automatically, which means that as I place these orders, they'd be back up at either the threshold that we've set for the min-max, or that net flow position is going to be back to the top of green. I can see that the order quantity has automatically populated here of that recommended order from Replenishment plus NetSuite. So I can click on each of these individually if I like, or I can click Mark All, and it's going to select all of those items for me, and their net flow positions would be back to the top of green, including my buy items and then also my make items. It's going to generate those work orders. If I'm looking at my order details, this is where I can see all of those purchase orders, the work orders or transfer orders if I have that in the system. And so what I can see is I have 10 parts that I'm placing orders for going to 5 different vendors. So we're always going to consolidate any same vendor purchase orders or work orders so that you're not sending multiple POs to the same vendor. If I say, hey, Tim's Hardware, I know that I get a discount this month if I order more than that recommended quantity, I'm okay with that. I can very easily override that 25 to the 100 that I know I get the discount at. Do that in the system, it's going to automatically update that total PO that I would be placing for the day. So very easily can use some of that known intelligence that you have for some of your vendors to take advantage of discounts that you might know about. When I look at all of my items here, I can see FPA. This is finished part A, and it's generating a work order to make part. It has a bill of material. So I'm going to click on FPA. I can click on it right from this screen, and it's going to take a look at this item that has a bill of material attached to it. So when I look at FPA, this is a make part, I can see right away that I need to make those orders that I saw on the workbench because my net flow line's in the yellow zone. I need to make enough to get myself back up to the top of green here. Since it is a make part, I can see the bill of material and all of the items that are going into FPA. This information is brought over from NetSuite. That is the system of record. So I can see here all of the components and subcomponents that are going into FPA. When I'm looking at this bill of material, anywhere where I have the 3 zones, those buffers applied to it, that's where I can expect my constant material availability. So anytime I want to make FPA, I know that these are already available. These items that have the gray boxes next to them, these are my buy to order, make to order parts. And then I can see here that PPA has the gray around it, but also has that black circle. That's my longest unbuffered leg, which just means that anytime I want to make FPA, I have to first purchase PPA, wait 25 days to receive it, another 10 days to make FPA, which is how I get this total R plus lead time of 25 days, or of 35 days. So I know that PPA, might make financial sense to apply that buffer there so that whenever I want to make FPA, PPA will already be available. So I'm going to make that decision to compress this lead time and hold stock of PPA. So I'm going to click on PPA and I'm going to show you how we would decouple within this bill of material. It's a non-buffered part. I don't have any on hand right now, but I'm going to make that financial decision to apply the buffer. During an implementation, we would spend a lot more time here applying the right buffer settings, really doing an analysis on this part before we actually assign a buffer. But what you'll see here as I apply this buffer is right away that buffer profile is going to be assigned to PPA, So we'll have constant material availability now when we want to go back and make FPA in the future. The system's going to automatically update. Again, we're completely native to NetSuite, so there's no toggling back and forth between the two different systems once you've made a change. My on-hand inventory for PPA is at 0, but now the next time that I place an order for this, I should expect to have more on hand because I've applied this buffer. And when I go back and look at FPA, I'm going to see that power of making the financial decision here to hold stock of PPA of a cheaper component within this bill of material. Right now, to get back up to the top of green, I would have to make 100-something units to get back up to that 353. So what I can, and my total R plus lead time is 35 days. So I've applied the PPA buffer, and I'm going to refresh this buffer. Again, it's going to automatically update. And what I'll be able to see is um, the difference in applying a buffer within that bill of material to say, hey, I want to compress my lead time. I want to make myself more responsive to my customers. So I'm going to make a financial decision here to hold stock. What I can see when I look at FPA now, and I go back to this bill of material, is that now PPA has that buffer applied to it, and I no longer have a recommended order for FPA. Before I was in the yellow zone, now I'm actually over the top of the green zone. I no longer have a recommended order, and my buffer size shrunk from 353 at the top of green down to 141 units. So now I no longer have to make as much of this expensive finished good. And I can also see that my R plus lead time went from 35 days down to a total of 14 days. So what happened? We made that decision to hold stock of PPA. So now anytime I want to make FPA, SAE is my longest unbuffered leg. So I only have to make SAE, which is 4 days, another 10 days to manufacture FPA, and my total R plus lead time is 14 days. So I've made myself more responsive to customers by reducing that total overall lead time, while also reducing the amount of the expensive finished good that I need to have on hand on average to meet those orders. So that's the power of decoupling within DDMRP, which is another way to enhance that materials flow through strategically placing that buffer within a bill of material for constant material availability. Now, as a planner, I can say, hey, this is great. I have those buffer settings in place. I've seen all of my recommended orders. I've gone up here and I've clicked generate orders from that accept recommended orders page. It's linked back up with my NetSuite ordering process. So I'm done for the day with placing my orders at that plant location. Could have executed on all of that, but I still have items that need my attention. Maybe a supplier's late, a shipment got delayed and it was out of control. But inevitably, I'm having to deal with an issue that's come up because we're in the supply chain world. So the way that I would see that is through these R plus alerts. When I go into my R plus alerts, this is where I can see alerts to avoid potential problem areas or expedite orders to get out of a stock out position. So we have 3 types of alerts. Some of this is older data, so I hope that you are not still in a stock out position from 2017, 4 years later. But when I look at these 3 types of alerts, the first one is this current inventory alert. And what this is telling me is I'm currently stocked out of this item, very simply. I can see that this sales order caused the stock out, and this purchase order, this is the next item or the next order that I would receive to get myself out of that stock out position. When I look at this material synchronization alert, this is I'm not currently stocked out, but based off of the demand that we need to fulfill and the supply that I have in the system within one lead time, we will stock out unless I take an action here. So I can see that this sales order is going to put me in a stock out position. So I might want to expedite this next purchase order so I can receive supply earlier and avoid a stock out. If I look at this projected stock out, this is where a stock out isn't 100% imminent, but if that average daily usage continued at its current rate, I'm most likely to stock out in the future. I can see when that future stock out might be. So it's going to allow me to get ahead of that stock out before it occurs. So just providing better visibility for a planner to be able to get ahead of those potential problem areas. And then the last thing I want to touch on today is reporting functionality that's built natively into the system. We have a lot of reporting that's already pre-built, but what I'm going to show a report of today is this buffer trend graph. So this is a report, this is at the aggregate level. So this is showing the entire system, and it's a way to help monitor the overall health of the environment, see how successful an implementation's been. I can filter on vendors, planners, certain locations if I wanted to drill down and get a little bit more detail. But what I'm seeing on this graph is that it's a 2-axis graph. So on the left here, I have the distribution of parts based off of where they are and where that net flow is in relation to the buffer. So I can see here that I have a lot of items that are still in that blue zone, pretty typical at the beginning of an implementation that we're carrying too much inventory so we could avoid stockouts. What I want to see over time is these blue zones start to shrink and see more of these green and yellow zones start to appear. I also want to see my on-hand value start to converge somewhere out here with my expected average inventory value. And I can see how much I have tied up in my inventory total. So this is the aggregate view by the dollar value over here. So I want to see these two start to converge over here and show me how well my implementation has been. I want to see more of that green zone. I want to be carrying less of too much. I want to have the opportunity to work through that on-hand inventory. And because I'm following that net flow equation, that allows me to work through that on-hand inventory position. So I can start to see more of that green and yellow zone and hopefully start to see that on-hand inventory value decrease and free up some of that working capital. That's just one of the reports that has been built into Replenishment Plus NetSuite. This is a very high-level overview of Replenishment Plus NetSuite. I know we've covered a lot in a short amount of time, but excited to show how demand-driven MRP works in Replenishment Plus NetSuite and how we've helped provide better visibility for planners, managers to run more on that autopilot mentality for a supply chain. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Tanvir. He's been monitoring the chat so we can see any of the questions that might have come in.
Hey, thank you, Brittany. Appreciate that. Again, we have some great questions here today, so appreciate everybody's attention and willingness to ask these. First question we got was a question about what type of integration is required. A great question that we get here. There's actually no integration required, as Brittany covered here. The R Plus is a suite app and it's installed directly into your NetSuite instance, so that seamlessly, brings information in and out of the flow of NetSuite and back into R Plus. So leading into another question, which is, came up. Was asked, what type of information does R Plus send back to NetSuite? The question is also, will it overwrite anything in NetSuite? With it, R Plus being built natively into NetSuite, it reads the information from your NetSuite items. And as Brittany showed, there's R Plus records which are created here. And the information that gets passed to that R Plus record is, information, item details, on-hand inventory, open supply, open demand. When recommended orders are accepted via R Plus, the native NetSuite workflows are used to create those orders, and there's really no impact to your native NetSuite item records at that point. So there's that piece of information not flowing through there. We got another question here about the types of reporting that's available in R Plus. As we see here, there are reports and save searches that are built within Replenishment Plus. Again, Brittany briefly covered some of those. Also, the R Plus fields, any information in these R Plus fields can be included into existing reports or save searches that you already have created in your instance. So again, that makes that available, those fields available both to bring in native NetSuite fields into those reports, or again, if you have those native NetSuite searches that are already made, these R Plus record fields can be again used in any of that reporting there too. I got another question here about updates that take place on the records. How can R plus records be modified or updated? Another great question here. Those can be updated again via the product, the UI itself there, or mass changes can be made via the native NetSuite CSV uploads that take place there. So be sure to great to click on the individual question or individual updates that come up, but in more advanced or mass updates, those can be done via the CSV uploads. I have another question here on coming up here asking, as you plan at the item location level, does that have to be at different levels of the organization, or that can be at different locations within an assembly plant? That's a great question. The initial setup that we saw here for any R plus records will take the information at the single item location level, but there is the advanced ability under our advanced options to also include additional locations for the same item to be managed. It's going to manage the total requirements for the item. So again, in those examples, that could be, if you have the same item and you want to manage and see, hey, what's my on hand at this other location, or what's my supplier demand at these other locations, we can modify the R plus record to also include those other locations, and that gives you the ability then to see what the usage is of this total item across your supply chain, what the inventory supplier demand is also, which helps drive that net flow, and you see a total picture of the buffer and the net flow for that item, so you get a total view of the material requirement for that. Another question that we have here, what are some of the best lessons learned you have regarding implementing this NetSuite solution? Again, a great question that we have here. We have a team of really dedicated team of implementation consultants that get very engaged with the client, right? We provide education around the DDMRP methodology and then the Replenishment Plus software. We map out process flows for material and transactional movements, which help both us and the clients get better understanding how to set up and configure R plus. And we really, get invested in understanding how we can best help the organization really ensure that we get those tangible and sustainable results. So we really have look at the NetSuite environment, how your initial inventory looks, how your data looks in NetSuite, and really with some of our clients, they realize, how the bill of materials look, right? Is there bill of material setups that need to be done? Are there certain item attributes that need to be modified or input in? And whenever we get, a lot of that data cleaned up in some sense in NetSuite, that just helps when we're setting up R plus, actually being able to get the right signals and get the right information flowing into R plus. And it's really becomes a interactive engagement to really see here. As we work through with the client, a lot of these things that we talked about, the safe searches, the reports, the things like that come up, there's a lot of interactions that we'll have as a team to, again, best understand how we can ensure that R plus is giving the correct signals to all the users to be able to use. We provide in-depth training, a lot of, again, interactive sessions that come up, and all in turn to, as we say here, ensure tangible and sustainable results throughout here. Another question here that we have, how does DDMRP deal with changes to the BOM as we are using parts and replacing with another? Great question there too. As we see here, we have the ability within Replenishment Plus to introduce in different items into when new items are being introduced in, we have the ability to link items and in some sense be able to say, okay, this item will be taking the attributes of this other item and will then be able to link those usages to help build buffer positions for like by like items. And that's one way that we can handle that. Of course, there's some more advanced ways, and we can get into more details and be sure to provide the feedback on that there too. So we'll have that definitely as a follow-up question here too. Another great question here. How often are we releasing improvements to the Replenishment Plus NetSuite application? Again, we have a very agile approach to the release schedule that we have for Replenishment Plus NetSuite. We have, very often updates that are happening with that. Some of those are, again, performance related. Some of them are feature enhancements, and we have a whole release schedule that's tightly monitored and really communicated well with our client base here too. So we're always evolving the product and always want to ensure that, again, we're putting into the product all of those enhancements and features that are going to help all of our clients across the board here. And with that, again, we have a couple of more questions here that are really specific to some of the clients here, but we'll make sure that, again, we follow up with these in more detail. And again, appreciate everybody's understanding and attention here today. And Brittany, I'll pass that back over to you.
Awesome. Thanks, Tanvir. We will definitely reach out to answer some of those more specific questions. If you have any questions from the webinar today, please feel free to send me the email, bbader@demanddriventech.com. Also want to mention that we can run a simulation of your items to show how they would perform in a DDMRP environment. So we can show how we would have planned your items over the last year. And in doing so, we can simulate service levels, inventory levels, and the like using your real data. Please email me if you'd like to walk through that exercise. Always happy to show what your results and potential return on investment could be. And with that, thank you everyone for your time today.